Hello, sleepy soul. The night is quiet, the world is asleep, and something is waiting in the dark. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and write your country and current time in the comments. Now listen carefully. The rain had started in the late afternoon, washing the streets of the small riverside town in muted reflections of neon signs and street lamps. I walked slowly, coat pulled tight around me, letting the chill seep into my bones. Loneliness had been my constant companion since the breakup. Even the cafes felt alien, their warmth distant. The soft jazz leaking through a cracked door only emphasized the emptiness I carried. The Lantern Festival had begun. Floating lights, hundreds of them, drifted over the river, glowing softly in the fog. I had come for distraction, for some fragile sense of tradition, some tether to a world I felt slipping away. They moved at first like any lanterns would, drifting with the current. But as the evening deepened, I noticed something. One would linger near a person for just a little too long, circling them slowly. A chill prickled along my spine. I watched the first disappearance happen. An older man, waving to someone in the crowd, was suddenly gone. Just gone. The lanterns around him pulsed, and then he was gone. No scream, no struggle. Nothing but the fog and the river, swallowing him whole. I wanted to believe it was an accident. Maybe he slipped. Maybe the crowd didn't see. Then I saw her. Mara. She appeared as the rain-slicked cobblestones reflected her silhouette in the streetlights. She smiled faintly, quietly, the kind of smile that felt like safety. She knew my favorite cafe, the song I hummed walking home, the book I always carried in my coat pocket. She fit into my fractured loneliness like a warm hand. "I noticed you watching the lanterns," she said softly. Her voice calm, measured, comforting. I told myself it made sense. Maybe I was overthinking. But the lanterns moved differently around her. They swirled with a grace that almost felt intentional, circling her, dipping, then rising. My chest tightened. I followed her, letting the fog and rain guide my steps. Footsteps echoed faintly across the cobblestones. Every creak of a door, hum of an appliance from a nearby cafe, distant siren became unnervingly amplified. Then the impossible details began. She knew the streets I took home. She knew the exact time I left my apartment, the number of steps I took to the first street lamp. She hummed songs I hadn't played in months. I wanted to believe it was coincidence or intuition. I told myself it made sense. The lanterns reacted to us both, drifting toward her, dipping toward me, circling slowly. My rational mind screamed at me. It's imagination. It's the festival, a trick of the fog. I saw another disappearance. A young woman vanished in the middle of the square. The lanterns hovered above her, pulsing. The crowd murmured, but did not intervene. Panic clutched at my chest. Mara touched my arm. "It's old. The town has always offered a soul each year." Her eyes were calm, almost kind. "The river takes what it needs. It's learning." I swallowed hard. The words made sense and didn't. I wanted to believe she was safe, that her comfort was real. I rationalized her knowledge of the town's secrets. Maybe she's lived here long. Maybe she knows the stories. Footsteps echoed behind us, my own, or someone else's. Every distant sound, every floorboard creak, every subtle vibration in the air felt like an orchestration. I realized someone or something was cataloging my movements, every thought, every hesitation. The lanterns pulsed faster now, circling more insistently. They dipped low, close to the water, as if listening to the river's hunger. I saw a young boy vanish next, dragged silently beneath the fog, leaving only ripples in the river. I tried to rationalize again. It's a trick of perception. I'm exhausted. I told myself it made sense. Mara held my hand, guiding me away from the riverbank, but the lanterns followed. The way she watched them, almost knowledgeable, sent a shiver down my spine. She knew how they moved, when they would strike. And then I noticed, she didn't blink when I did. Her gaze anticipated my fear, measured it, absorbed it. The festival's music, distant and sweet, turned discordant in my ears. Rain dripped in irregular patterns. Neon signs reflected in the puddles like fractured memories. Every shadow stretched too long. Reflections lagged behind movement. I realized that the town itself had become a labyrinth, and I was not in control. She whispered my name. Calm. Precise. It won't take both of us tonight. Not if you follow me. I rationalized, desperately clinging to her warmth. She's real. She's protective. Maybe she's lived through this before. We moved through the fog, and the lanterns began to anticipate us, dipping low over the river, following the rhythm of our steps. I saw faces in the crowd vanish before my eyes, one by one, and the lanterns pulsed with each disappearance. The pattern was undeniable. The festival was a ritual, feeding the river, a predatory presence learning each year, selecting its victim. I wanted to leave, run, but every street I tried was blocked by shadows, the lanterns pulsing ahead, always waiting. Then came the confrontation. I saw the town council's old records. Hidden in the archive Mara led me to, proof that each disappearance had been documented, obfuscated, erased from memory. And the truth, Mara was not the entity controlling the lanterns. She was a survivor, guiding me, protecting me. The true manipulator had been observing through old festival traditions, exploiting the town's fear and the river's appetite. The police arrived when I finally escaped to a safe apartment across town, evidence in hand. Records, photos, metadata of previous festival victims. The river still ran, but for the first time, I felt the weight of awareness, control passing into human hands. I survived, but I am not the same. The fog, the lanterns, the river, they remain in memory. Every neon reflection on wet asphalt, every whisper of wind through fog, reminds me that observation, obsession, and ritual linger in quiet spaces, waiting for the unwary. And sometimes, late at night, I watch the river glow faintly, lanterns drifting with no wind, and I wonder, who decides who is safe? Who watches from the shadows? And what lessons are learned when fear is cataloged, ritualized, anticipated? I don't know, and I fear I may never know. Story 2. I retired from radio the same week my wife left. Not officially. Officially, she had left 6 months earlier, after 31 years of marriage and one quiet sentence at the kitchen table. I don't know who you are when no one is listening, but I kept working after that, kept filling midnight hours with weather reports, old jazz, local road closures, birthdays, lost dogs, church announcements, and songs people requested for spouses who no longer remembered them. Then the station replaced me with automation. A computer voice took my hour. So I moved to Grayford, a rural town pressed between pine woods and a black river that never seemed to reflect the sky. Rain lived there. Fog too. In the mornings, it curled through the streets like smoke from something buried. My cabin stood half a mile from the old bridge. It smelled of damp wood, coffee, and electrical dust. At night, the refrigerator hummed. The floorboards creaked under their own weight. My phone buzzed with messages I didn't answer. My daughter sent photos of my grandson. My ex-wife sent tax documents. Nobody sent anything that required me. So I rebuilt what I knew. A small studio in the spare room. Mixer. Microphone. Receiver. Old headphones with cracked leather. A local online stream no one listened to except truckers, insomniacs, and men like me who had mistaken being heard for being loved. I called it the late signal. Rain on the roof. Soft jazz under my voice. Static between songs. That was my life. Until the first call came through. It was 1:13 a.m. The river fog pressed against the window. The studio lamp burned yellow. I was playing a Billie Holiday record when the phone line clicked. An old sound. Analog. Impossible because the system was digital. I answered anyway. This is Elias Vale. You're on the late signal. Static breathed. Then a woman whispered, "Please tell them I'm still here." Her voice was thin, far away, warped by interference. "Ma'am, I'm at Mill Road," she said. "The bridge lights are out. It's 1987. I can hear the river under the road." I sat very still. Rain tapped the glass. "What did you say your name was?" "Annabelle." The name moved through me coldly. Annabelle had been one of Grayford's old stories. A schoolteacher whose car was found near the bridge in 1987. No body. No explanation. The The town said the river took her. Who is this? I asked. Static thickened. I can hear you breathing, Eli. Nobody called me Eli anymore. Not since childhood. The line went dead. I told myself it was a prank. Small towns liked old ghosts. Lonely men made good targets. Maybe someone had found my full name online. Maybe I was overthinking. I told myself it made sense. The next morning, I went to the only cafe in Grayford. Rain blurred the windows. Neon from a beer sign trembled in puddles outside, even though it was 10 in the morning. The place smelled of burnt toast and wet coats. A radio behind the counter played soft jazz under a weather report. That was where I met Nora. She was sitting alone with a laptop and a mug of tea, hair pinned back, eyes tired but kind. She looked up when I asked the waitress about Annabelle. You shouldn't ask about the river before coffee, Nora said. Her voice was calm, educated, gentle. I smiled because I had forgotten how to respond to gentleness. You local? Archivist, she said. County records, local history, missing persons, flood maps, all the cheerful things. I told her about the call. Not all of it. Not that the woman used my childhood name. Nora listened without laughing. That story changes depending on who tells it, she said. Some say Anna vanished. Some say she left. Some say the river claims one person every year. Do you believe that? She stirred her tea slowly. I believe towns invent spirits when people don't want paperwork. That made me trust her. For a while. The calls continued. A boy from 1962, trapped near the old rail crossing. A mechanic from 1999, calling from a gas station that had burned down before smartphones existed. A man from 1974 who kept saying, "The lights are wrong. The town is folding." Every caller knew something private. One knew the song I played after my wife left. One knew I slept with the hallway light on. One knew I kept my wedding ring in an aspirin bottle above the sink. I stopped sleeping. At night, the cabin became a listening device. Rain on the roof, wind in the pines, distant water moving over stones, the refrigerator humming like a low voice. My phone buzzing at odd hours with unknown numbers that left voice notes filled with static. Nora became my anchor. She came by with printed records, old maps, coffee and paper cups. She sat across from me in the studio while I played back the recordings. "You're not crazy," she said once. I wanted to believe her. Those words are dangerous when you are lonely. She noticed everything. That I rubbed my left thumb when anxious. That I kept the headphones on even when no audio played. That I paused before saying my ex-wife's name. "You were trained to fill silence," she said. "Maybe now silence feels like punishment." I laughed quietly. "You sound like my therapist." "No," she said. "I sound like someone paying attention." The red flag was there. I painted it white. The deeper I searched, the stranger it became. The calls matched old reports. Dates, locations, weather, even phrases from witness statements that were never digitized. Nora said some archives had been scanned recently. Maybe someone had accessed them. Who? She looked at the rain-streaked window. Someone who wants you listening. Then came the first impossible broadcast. I was live at midnight, reading a storm warning, when my own voice cut through the stream. Not present me, younger me, from decades ago. A recording from my first radio job, a tape I kept locked in a box. My younger voice said, "This one goes out to Ruth, who says Elias never hears her unless there's a microphone between them." Ruth, my ex-wife. She had said something like that once during our worst year. Never on air. Never to anyone else. My headphones filled with static. Then Annabelle whispered, "The river keeps what listens too long." I ripped the headphones off. The studio monitor squealed. The lights flickered. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. "You're close now, Eli. Don't stop listening." I called the police the next morning. Sheriff Calder had the expression of a man who preferred crimes with footprints. He took the recordings. He nodded at the equipment. He looked at me like grief had made me unreliable. "Could be radio interference," he said. "This came through my stream. Could be someone messing with you." "Yes," I said. That's why I'm here. Nora stood beside me, quiet, supportive. Calder glanced at her. You're helping him? Someone should, she said. Soft, protective, almost practiced. That night, I found the first real clue. Metadata. The voice notes sent to my phone all passed through different numbers. Burners. But the attached files carried traces. Editing software. AI audio tools. Noise profiles layered over synthetic voices. The dead were not calling. Someone had built them. From old recordings, public archives, phone videos, local oral histories, stolen voicemail backups. The static was not a ghost. It was camouflage. I felt relief first. Then worse fear. Ghosts haunt randomly. People choose. I searched my cabin. Behind the bookshelf, I found a listening device. Small. Black. Taped beneath the sill. I stared at it while rain tapped the window above me. I thought of Nora sitting in that chair. Nora bringing coffee. Nora saying, "You're not crazy." My phone buzzed. Her name. Don't panic. I can explain. I had not called her. I had not texted. I backed away from the window. Outside, through fog and rain, a figure stood near the trees. Still. Watching. I called Sheriff Calder again. This time, my voice was not calm. The next hours moved like scenes from someone else's life. Police cars without sirens. Flashlights crossing wet pine trunks. Officers in my cabin photographing devices hidden behind vents, under the desk, inside an old radio cabinet I had bought at a flea market. They found a transmitter near the river. Then another below the old bridge. A concealed server in an abandoned bait shop. And in the locked back room of the county archive, they found folders. Mine was one of them. Not just me. Others. A widower who ran the hardware store. A divorced nurse. A teenager who live-streamed from her bedroom window. People alone enough to listen. The antagonist was not a spirit in the river. It was a person who had learned to wear one. Nora's real name was Celia Wren. No county archivist. No local historian. Former audio preservation specialist. Former crisis line volunteer. Dismissed after complaints about inappropriate contact with callers. She had been building the static for years. A private mythology. A manipulation campaign. She studied grief patterns. Collected voices. Cloned the dead. Used burner phones, fake profiles, compromised emails, old radio equipment, and local legends to create hauntings tailored to whoever she chose. Every year, someone in Grayford disappeared from their own life. Not always physically. Sometimes they sold homes and left. Sometimes they stopped speaking to family. Sometimes they became obsessed with the river, the voices, the idea that they alone could save someone lost in time. Celia called it joining the signal. The police called it coercive stalking. I called it authorship. She wanted to write people from the inside. They arrested her at the old bridge. I was there because she asked for me. Calder said not to come close. I didn't. Rain fell hard enough to erase distance. The river below was swollen and black. Red and blue police lights flashed across the wet road, breaking in the puddles like neon. Celia stood near the bridge rail in a gray coat, hair plastered to her face, hands visible. She looked smaller without the cabin light and the coffee and the gentle voice. But her eyes were the same. Careful. Hungry. Eli, she called. I hated that my body responded to the name. Sheriff Calder stepped forward. Celia Wren, you need to come with us. She ignored him. You were good on air, she said to me. People opened themselves because you sounded safe. I said nothing. You understand what I made. You made traps. I made continuity, she said. People disappear anyway. I gave them a place to remain. You stole their voices. She smiled faintly. Voices want to be heard. That was when I understood. She didn't think she was lying. That was the terrifying part. The delusion had architecture, evidence, ritual, technology, intimacy. She had built a machine that turned loneliness into belief. The officers moved in. She did not fight. As they cuffed her, my phone buzzed. A final voice note. It played before I could stop it. Ruth's voice. My ex-wife. Soft. Tired. Elias, come home. For 1 second, the bridge vanished. I was back in our old kitchen, light over the table, her hands around a mug, her saying what I had never known how to answer. Then the file glitched. Static swallowed her. Celia watched my face and whispered, "See? You still listen." They took her away. The town recovered publicly. That is what towns do. They repaired locks, deleted articles, called it a bizarre harassment case, a disturbed woman, a technological hoax, a lesson in cybersecurity. But privately, Grayford changed. People stopped romanticizing the river. They stopped saying it took souls. They admitted men left. Women ran. Children grew up and never came back. The dead were dead. The missing were not metaphors. The past was not a place we could call if we tuned carefully enough. I moved my studio out of the cabin. I still broadcast sometimes, but never after midnight. No open phone lines. No anonymous voice notes. No static between songs. Rain still bothers me. So does jazz from another room. So does the low hum of an appliance in an empty house. Ruth and I speak now occasionally. Not to return. Not to repair everything. Just to be honest while we still can. I learned that loneliness is not silence. Loneliness is what happens when silence starts answering back. And trust is not a voice that knows your wounds. That can be studied. Privacy is not paranoia. It is the boundary between memory and possession. Obsession does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers through static, using the voices of people you miss, offering meaning where there is only pain. I used to believe radio connected the lonely. Now I know connection without consent is only invasion with a softer name. The river still runs through Grayford. Black, patient, reflecting nothing, but it never claimed anyone. People did. People with microphones. People with passwords. People who understood that the fastest way inside a person is not through fear. It is through the voice they have been waiting desperately to hear again. Story 3. Rain followed me into Millvale. It slid down the bus windows in trembling lines, turning the town's welcome sign into a smear of yellow paint and rust. Beyond it, the fields stretched black under the evening fog. Empty roads, cold ditches, farmhouses with porch lights that blinked through the mist like tired eyes. I came there because my marriage had ended. That sounds cleaner than it was. The truth was uglier, quieter. Years of being corrected, watched, reduced. Years of apologizing for my own voice. When I finally left, I didn't feel free. I felt hollow, like someone had moved out of my body and forgotten to turn off the lights. Millvale was supposed to be silence. A cheap apartment above a closed pharmacy. One cafe. One grocery store. One road out toward the farms. At night, my refrigerator hummed louder than traffic. The pipes clicked behind the walls. Rain tapped the windows, patient and soft. Sometimes music drifted up from the cafe below after closing, slow jazz, low enough to feel like memory. That was where I met Rowan. He was sitting near the window with a notebook and black coffee, watching the rain make neon reflections out of the open sign. "You're new," he said. I almost laughed. "That obvious?" "People here look at the ground when they walk," he said. "You keep looking behind you." It should have unsettled me. Instead, it felt like being understood. Rowan had a calm voice, careful eyes. He never interrupted. He asked questions like he already knew the shape of the answers. He told me he worked in restoration. Old houses, land records, local history. "The Harvest House is the one people ask about," he said one night. I had heard the name already. Everyone had. An abandoned farmhouse at the edge of town. Crops growing wild around it. Not normal crops. Tall, pale stalks that seemed to appear overnight after rain. Locals joked about cursed soil, but they didn't smile when they said it. "Nothing grows there in daylight," the woman at the cafe told me. "Only after dark." I told myself small towns needed stories. Maybe I was overthinking. Then Rowan showed me the photos. Same field. Same angle. One taken at sunset, bare mud. One taken at dawn, rows of waist-high plants. My skin tightened. "Time-lapse trick?" I asked. "Maybe," he said. He smiled gently, like he wanted me to feel safe inside the question. I wanted to believe it. Over the next week, Rowan became part of my routine. Coffee at 7, walks after rain, messages after midnight when my apartment felt too quiet. He knew the corner table I liked, the song I played when I couldn't sleep, the way I checked the lock twice before bed. One night my phone buzzed at 1:13 a.m. You forgot the window latch. I sat up. Rain tapped the glass. The refrigerator hummed. My window was open by an inch. I messaged back. How did you know that? 3 dots appeared, then vanished. Then, old buildings breathe. You learn their habits. Asterisk, asterisk. I told myself it made sense. The next day he brought me a scarf. Gray wool. Soft. Familiar. My ex used to say gray made me look less tired. I said before I could stop myself. Rowan looked at me with quiet concern. You don't have to explain yourself with me. I looked down at the scarf. I had never told him about that. Not directly. But maybe I had posted an old photo. Maybe he saw it somewhere. Maybe everyone looked people up now. Dating apps. Social media. Public fragments. Maybe privacy was just an outdated word. The Harvest House sat 5 miles outside town. I first saw it through fog. A white farmhouse sagging behind a broken fence. Windows black. Porch tilted. The field behind it darker than the sky. Rows of pale growth leaning together in the rain. The air smelled wet and sweet. Not fresh. Sweet like fruit left too long in a warm room. Rowan stood beside me with his hands in his coat pockets. People used to leave offerings here, he said. What kind? He watched the house instead of me. Names. Photos. Things they wanted forgotten. A crow moved along the roofline, slow and deliberate. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. A voice note. I played it before thinking. My own voice came through the speaker. Soft. Tired. Recorded somewhere close. I don't want to be alone anymore. I froze. Rowan turned toward me. What is it? I locked the screen. Nothing. But my hands were shaking. That night, back in my apartment, I checked every account I had. Instagram. Facebook. Old cloud backups. Emails. Deleted folders. My voice existed everywhere. Old videos. Birthday messages. Work calls. Wedding clips I had never fully erased. Enough for someone to copy me. Enough for someone patient. At 2:07 a.m., another message arrived. From Rowan. Some houses remember what people bury. I didn't answer. The floor creaked in the hallway outside my door. One step. Then silence. I pressed my eye to the peephole. Empty corridor. Yellow light. Wet footprints leading away. The next morning, the cafe owner wouldn't look at me. You went out there with him, she said. With Rowan? Her mouth tightened. There's no Rowan from here. I laughed once. Too sharp. He works in restoration. No, honey, she said softly. He doesn't. I wanted to believe there was an explanation. A nickname. A misunderstanding. Instead, I searched his number. Nothing. His profile photo led nowhere. His email had been created 3 weeks before I arrived. My stomach turned cold. Then an email appeared in my inbox. No subject. Only an attachment. A map of my apartment. Not a rough sketch. A floor plan. Marked with red dots. Bed. Window. Cafe table. Bathroom mirror. Underneath, one line. You are ready for harvest. I went to the police. The officer listened politely until I said Harvest House. Then his face closed. Kids mess around there, he said. People scare themselves. This isn't kids. He sighed. Do you have proof someone threatened you? I showed the voice note. He frowned. Could be edited. I showed the floor plan. His expression changed. Not enough. But enough. Stay away from that property, he said. I'll make a note. A note. That was all fear became when it entered a system. A note. That night, Rowan knocked on my apartment door. Not hard. 2 soft taps. Like he already knew I was standing on the other side. I know you're scared, he said through the wood. His voice was calm. Almost tender. I can explain. I didn't move. You're not losing your mind, he said. That's what he made you believe before, isn't it? My breath caught. He knew about my ex. The phrases, the corrections, the long, slow theft of confidence. You deserve to know what's real, Rowan whispered. I opened the door. That was my mistake. He stood in the hall, rain on his coat, though the stairwell was dry. His eyes were gentle, too gentle. You've been watched, he said. By you. By people who choose not to see. He tilted his head. I see you. The words should have comforted me. They sounded like a lock turning. He told me there were recordings hidden at the Harvest House. Proof of what had happened to missing people. Proof the town had ignored it. All you have to do is spend one night there, he said. Let the cameras run. Let them come. Who? He looked almost sad. The ones who feed it. I should have said no. I should have shut the door. But trauma does strange things to judgment. It makes danger feel familiar. It makes certainty feel like love. I wanted the truth. So I went. The farmhouse smelled of dust, rainwater, and old wood. My flashlight cut narrow wounds through the dark. Floorboards bent under my steps. Somewhere inside the walls, something clicked and hummed, electrical and steady. Not ancient. Modern. A generator. The kitchen was empty except for jars on the shelves, each labeled with dates and initials. In the parlor, cameras watched from corners, small black lenses hidden in carved wood. My phone lost signal, then buzzed anyway. Go upstairs. I stood very still. Outside, rain struck the windows. The field shifted in the wind, pale stalks brushing together with a dry whisper. I climbed. The bedroom at the end of the hall had been converted into a control room. Monitors, hard drives, printed photos, dozens of people, men, women, travelers, runaways, people passing through, people no one would immediately look for. And me, at the cafe, at my window, sleeping, crying, unlocking my door. My knees weakened. On the desk was a folder labeled with my full name. Inside were screenshots from my dating profiles, old posts, therapy forum comments, divorce filings, address history, purchase records. Every private wound reduced to data. At the bottom was a note. Subject responds strongly to rescue framing. High guilt. High compliance. Asterisk asterisk. I heard the floor creak downstairs. Not the house settling. A person. Then Rowan's voice drifted up. You found the ugly part. I backed away from the desk. He appeared in the doorway, calm as ever. Behind him stood two others. A woman in a green raincoat. A man with a camera rig. Not ghosts. Not cursed soil. People. What is this? I whispered. Rowan looked at the monitors. A correction. For what? For all the lives people walk past. He spoke softly, intelligently, as if explaining grief to a child. Some vanish. Some are erased. Some are turned into rumors. We preserve them. We make witnesses. My mouth went dry. The crops. He watched me. Come see. He took me outside. I don't know why I followed. Maybe fear. Maybe shock. Maybe because one of them had my car keys. The field was worse up close. The plants were not plants. They were human shapes arranged upright beneath layers of waxed cloth and root mesh, preserved, posed, disguised among pale stalks and irrigation lines. No gore, no open wounds, just stillness, faces hidden, tags hanging where leaves should have been, names, dates, stories. The sweetness in the air came from chemicals and wet soil. My body went numb. Rowan stood beside me like a guide in a museum. People remember fields, he said. They forget files. You killed them? His expression shifted, almost offended. Some were already lost. Some were brought by those who deserved to understand loss. The woman in green raised her phone and began recording. My face, my fear, my transformation into evidence. I realized then that I was not there to uncover the Harvest House. I was there to become part of it. The ancient thing beneath the farmhouse was not a monster. It was hunger, human hunger. For control, meaning, punishment, ownership of grief. My phone buzzed in Rowan's hand. He showed me the screen. A scheduled post from my account. I'm going away for a while. Don't look for me, asterisk asterisk. My voice note attached beneath it. My copied voice. My copied surrender. That woke something in me. Not courage. Refusal. I shoved the camera toward the mud and ran. The field tore at my coat. Rain blinded me. Behind me, someone shouted my name, not angry, almost disappointed. The road was farther than it looked. My lungs burned. Headlights appeared through fog. A patrol car. Then another. The officer from town stepped out, hand on his radio, face pale. Behind him was the cafe owner. I told them to follow you, she said. Her voice shook. They didn't believe me either. Not at first. The police found everything. The monitors, the hard drives, the preserved bodies in the field, the fake accounts, the voice models, the profiles of other targets. The group had operated for years under different names, feeding local legends because legends made people look away. Cursed soil was easier to accept than organized cruelty. Rowan was not Rowan. His real name was Daniel Voss. Former counselor, grief activist, manipulator, architect. He had built identities the way farmers build fences. Carefully, patiently, to keep people where he wanted them. Months later, I left Millvale. I live in another city now, above another cafe, under another humming refrigerator. Rain still turns windows into mirrors. Neon still breaks itself on wet pavement. Jazz still drifts through walls when I am trying not to remember. I survived, but survival did not return me to who I was. I check locks. I cover cameras. I read metadata. I no longer mistake attention for care. That is the part one keep returning to. Rowan did not frighten me at first. He comforted me. He learned the language of my loneliness and spoke it fluently. That is how control often enters. Not as violence, as understanding, as softness, as someone saying, I see you, when what they mean is, I know where to cut. I think about the harvest house sometimes. Not the field, not the names, the hunger, the old, human hunger to possess another person's story, to turn pain into evidence, to make memory serve obsession. Trust is not blindness. Privacy is not paranoia. And safety is not the absence of danger. It is the right to remain unknown in places you have not chosen to be seen. Story 4. Rain tapped softly against my window, like fingers drumming a quiet warning. Neon from the street below fractured in puddles, red and blue reflections shifting with every passing car. I hugged my mug of coffee, letting the warmth seep into my fingers, though it did little to chase away the chill I carried. I had moved into this apartment 3 months ago, trying to rebuild after a breakup that had left more bruises than memories. Loneliness had settled around me like fog, creeping into every corner. I liked the hum of the refrigerator, the soft jazz from my record player, the creak of the floorboards. It was all company, even if it wasn't alive. It started with the messages. A notification on my phone from Tinder, one I barely remembered swiping on. Sleep well. I'll be nearby. At first, I thought it was a joke. Harmless. Creepy maybe, but nothing I couldn't ignore. The sender's profile was calm, ordinary, smiling in a photo taken in a cafe. I told myself it was charm, subtle, clever. I replied cautiously. He introduced himself as Eli, and his voice in our messages was warm, considerate, almost soothing. Sleep well. I'll be nearby. Night after night. Every night. I laughed nervously the first few times, telling myself, he's just lonely. Or maybe it's a prank. I wanted to believe it. Then I heard it. A soft whisper coming through the wall. Sleep well. I'll be nearby. I froze. The sound was faint, intimate, unmistakable. My apartment seemed to shrink around me. The hum of the refrigerator became a low heartbeat, the wind tapping against the window a percussive warning. I told myself I was imagining it. Stress, paranoia, a coincidence. But the messages kept coming, and each night, I noticed details that didn't make sense. Eli knew my routines. He mentioned the cafe I always visited at 8 a.m., the jazz record I played on Thursdays, the way I folded my laundry, the song I hummed in the shower. I rationalized. Maybe he's observant. Maybe I overshared. I started noticing other things. Small shadows in the hallway outside my door. Footsteps above me at odd hours. My phone buzzed with notifications I hadn't set. Emails from accounts I didn't recognize, each containing screenshots of my messages to friends. AI voice notes played recordings of my conversations, perfectly cloned. I wanted to believe it made sense. I told myself it was coincidence. Eli began to appear in my life, outside the digital. At the cafe, at the park, at the corner store. He arrived at the exact moment I needed him, not always physically close, but somehow knowing. His presence was comforting, attentive, calm. And I wanted to believe it. I told myself it made sense. Then one night, as rain streaked down the window and the neon lights split across puddles on the street, I heard the message again. This time, clear, loud, coming from the wall beside my bed. Sleep well. I'll be nearby. I ran to the door, shaking, but the hallway was empty. I looked through the peephole. No one. The apartment below me was dark. The neighbors' lights were off. I called the police. Screenshots, metadata, phone logs. But they couldn't find anyone. No evidence. No break-ins. The spiral tightened. Every new discovery felt more invasive. Every ordinary object, the doorknob, the light switch, the fridge, seemed touched by someone else's knowledge. I began tracking his messages, trying to match times with movements in the apartment. And then I realized the impossible. Eli lived next door. He had matched with me only after months of watching, listening, cataloging my routines. Every move, every habit, every pattern mapped with precision. The confrontation was inevitable. I waited one night, letting the apartment fall silent, every hum, every creak, every distant siren a signal. My phone buzzed. A message from him. I see you're awake. Sleep well. I left my door unlocked, cameras rolling on my laptop, my hands trembling. Footsteps approached. A shadow moved under the door frame. I whispered, Eli. The door creaked open. He stood there calm, smiling. Observant. The warmth of his smile was almost disarming. Hi, he said, voice low, precise. I wanted to see if you were okay. Why? My voice shook. Because I care, he said. Not threatening, not aggressive, just knowing. Too knowing. I pulled out my phone. The police are on their way. He tilted his head. They'll see what you want them to see. But some things they don't understand. Not yet. Evidence stacked against him. Multiple fake identities, burner phones, digital surveillance, AI voice clones, recordings of hundreds of conversations. Each one a meticulously constructed obsession. Multiple victims, all carefully monitored. The police arrived minutes later. Eli, or the man who lived next door, was removed. Burners, devices, and accounts confiscated. I watched from the doorway as they led him away, his face calm, eyes glinting with quiet intelligence, still observing, still knowing. Weeks later, my apartment felt hollow. Silence no longer comforted me. I replayed every message, every footstep, every whisper through the walls. The hum of the refrigerator felt different, like it remembered, like it waited. I realized trust is fragile. Observation is invasive. An obsession doesn't always end with confinement. I survived, but I was changed. Watching, guarding myself in ways I hadn't known I needed. Privacy is a shield, boundaries are fragile, memory can betray. And sometimes the people who seem safe, the ones who care, are only patient predators waiting to be seen. I leave my doors locked now. My phone silent. Windows curtained. I remember the messages, the whispers, the precise, invasive attention. And I know this. Even in ordinary life, someone could be watching, listening, waiting. Sleep well. I'll be nearby. And maybe one night they will be. Story 5. The town smelled of rain and old stone. That was the first thing I noticed when I moved there. Not the church tower. Not the empty streets. Not the black well in the square, circled by iron bars and warnings no one seemed to obey. Just rain. It fell almost every night, soft and steady, tapping cafe windows, slicking the cobblestones, turning the yellow street lamps into trembling halos. At dusk, the whole town looked reflected, doubled, like another version of itself lived beneath the wet streets. I had come there to disappear quietly. After Julian left, the city became unbearable. Every cafe had a table where we had argued. Every crosswalk held the ghost of his hand leaving mine. He had not been cruel in ways people could photograph. He was worse than that. Calm, reasonable, surgical. He taught me to mistrust my own memory. So I rented a small apartment above a closed tailor's shop in Bellwether, a town famous for fog, bad phone reception, and a well that supposedly whispered after midnight. The locals called it St. Orla's Well. Tourists came in summer to laugh at it. No one laughed in winter. My apartment had thin walls, old pipes, and a refrigerator that hummed like it was thinking. At night, soft jazz drifted from the cafe across the square. Sometimes my phone buzzed at 2 a.m. with spam emails, dating app reminders, old memories disguised as notifications. I was lonely enough to answer anything. That was when I met Elias. He owned the cafe below the clock tower, a narrow place with fogged windows, chipped blue cups, and a record player that always seemed to be playing something slow. He had careful hands and a voice that made silence feel less dangerous. The first time I came in, he said, "Black coffee, 1 sugar." I stopped with my wet umbrella dripping onto the floor. "How did you know?" He smiled gently. "You look like someone who wants bitterness, but not too much." I should have found that strange. Instead, I laughed. I wanted to believe it. He became part of my routine. Morning coffee, evening nods, occasional conversations when the rain trapped me inside. He remembered that I hated cinnamon, that I liked corner tables, that I always checked my phone when church bells rang. "You're watching for someone," he said one night. I looked up. The cafe was almost empty. Rain slid down the windows. Outside, the well sat in the square, black and patient. "No," I said. He studied me with a softness that felt practiced. "Maybe not someone. Maybe proof." That landed too close. I told myself he was perceptive. Some people were. Maybe I was overthinking. The well started speaking on a Thursday. I know how that sounds. But it did. Elias had told me the story while closing the cafe. He wiped the counter slowly, his reflection broken in the dark window. "They say if you lean over after midnight, you hear the voice you trust most." That sounds like a warning disguised as folklore. Most folklore is. "What did you hear?" He looked toward the square. I stopped asking. That should have been enough. But loneliness turns warnings into invitations. At 12:13 a.m., I stood in the rain beside St. Orla's Well. The town was asleep. Neon from the pharmacy sign bled red across the wet stone. Somewhere far away, a siren passed and faded. My coat was soaked through. My breath came out pale in the fog. I leaned over the iron barrier. The well smelled of moss, rust, and cold earth. At first, nothing. Only water dripping somewhere deep below. Then a voice rose from the dark. My voice. Soft. Almost tender. "Don't trust the man with the red scarf." I stepped back so fast my heel slipped on stone. The square remained empty. Rain tapped the rooftops. The cafe windows were dark. I laughed once badly. A recording, I thought. A prank. A town with a haunted well would need tricks to survive winter. I told myself it made sense. The next morning, a man in a red scarf walked into the cafe while I was sitting by the window. I almost dropped my cup. He was old, with watery eyes and a leather satchel. Elias greeted him by name. "Morning, Mr. Vale." The old man nodded but did not smile. 10 minutes later, while he waited for coffee, his phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up. A message preview appeared. "Tell her tonight or I will." His face changed. Not fear. Recognition. By evening, the whole town knew. Mr. Vale had been keeping money from his sister's estate for years. Someone had emailed the documents to her lawyer. He vanished before dinner. The police found his car outside the train station, engine cold, scarf left on the seat. Nothing violent. Nothing impossible. Only ruin. Still, I did not sleep. That night, my apartment felt too awake. The refrigerator hummed. The pipes clicked. Footsteps passed in the hallway, and stopped outside my door. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. A voice note. I played it with my thumb shaking. At first, rain. Then my voice again. The girl in the yellow coat will not reach Sunday. I deleted it, then restored it, then deleted it again. At 3:04 a.m., I downloaded a metadata app, the kind Julian used to use when he accused me of hiding things. The file had no location data, but the device name remained. Orla_audio_02. I stared at the screen until morning. On Saturday, I saw the girl in the yellow coat. She was maybe 20. A student, I thought. She sat outside the library under a striped awning, smoking with one hand and scrolling with the other. Her laugh rose into the wet air and disappeared. I wanted to warn her, but what would I say? A well sent me a voice note. A recording of myself predicted your death. The next day, she did not die. That would have been too simple. Instead, she was arrested. Her boyfriend had collapsed at a party. The police found messages showing she had been supplying him pills. The town said overdose in whispers, the way small towns turn tragedy into fog. The girl screamed outside the station. I didn't write those messages. I stood across the street, rain dripping from my hair, and believed her. Because I knew what it felt like when proof arrived already arranged. That evening, Elias found me outside the cafe. You look pale. I'm fine. No, he said softly. You're performing fine. I hated how much I wanted to cry. Inside, the cafe was warm. Soft jazz played from the record player. Cups clinked. The espresso machine hissed like breath. He gave me tea without asking. You heard it, he said. My hand tightened around the cup. The well. I looked at him. His eyes were kind. Too kind. What is it? I asked. A place people put what they can't say directly. That's not an answer. It's the honest one. He sat across from me. I know what men like Julian do, he said. I went still. I had never told him Julian's name. The cafe seemed to narrow. Rain tapped the glass. A spoon clinked in the kitchen. How do you know that name? He did not blink. You mentioned him once. No. Maybe you did. Pain leaks, Mara. Even when we think we're sealed. Mara. Only Julian had called me that when he wanted me small. My full name was Amara. Everyone else used Amy. The room tilted slightly. I told myself he might have seen it online. Old posts. Court documents. A tagged photo. Something. People leave trails. Maybe I was overthinking. But that night I checked my accounts. New login attempts. Old emails opened. A dating profile I had not used in months reactivated. My cloud storage showed access from an unknown device. In my drafts folder, I found an email I had not written. Subject: what the well showed me. Body: I remember what happened in the blue room. There was no blue room. Then my phone buzzed. Elias, you should stop digging alone. It makes you easier to frighten. I looked toward the window. Across the square, the cafe was dark, but on the second floor above it, one light burned. A shadow stood behind the curtain, still, watching. The next whisper came from the well before midnight. I had not gone near it. It came through my phone, my own voice, low and broken. Elias will save you from what Elias made. I did not move for a long time. Then I called the police. At first, the officer sounded tired. Then I said metadata, unauthorized access, recordings, and predictive threats, and his tone changed. Do not confront him, he said. So of course I did. Not because I was brave, because fear becomes unbearable when it has no face. The cafe was closing when I walked in. Elias stood behind the counter, stacking cups. The record player spun a soft trumpet into the room. Rain blurred the windows. The well waited outside like a pupil. He looked up. You shouldn't be here. Why? Because you're angry. No, I'm awake. Something passed across his face. Almost admiration. I placed my phone on the counter and played the voice note. My own voice filled the cafe. Elias listened without surprise. When it ended, he sighed. You were doing so well. The words were quiet, almost regretful. My skin went cold. You made the recordings. I made mirrors. You hacked me. I studied you. You framed those people. I revealed patterns already there. The girl didn't write those messages. She was careless with passwords. I stepped back. Behind the counter, the small refrigerator hummed. Rain ticked against the glass. Above us, floorboards creaked. How did you get my voice? He looked genuinely saddened. You give pieces of yourself away every day. Voice notes, videos, calls through thin walls, dating apps, old interviews from your work page. AI only needs a little to become intimate. Why me? Because you came here already half erased. His voice softened, and that softness was the most invasive thing in the room. I saw how you walked past the well the first week, like you wanted something to call your name. I gave you structure, signs, a story. People need stories more than truth. You stalked me. I protected you from randomness. You created danger so you could explain it. He smiled faintly. Now you understand. My phone buzzed. A message from the police. Units outside. Keep him talking if safe. Elias glanced at my screen. He was close enough to read it. His expression changed. Not panic. Disappointment. Mara, he said. Don't call me that. You still think rescue comes from outside. He reached beneath the counter. I moved before I knew what he was reaching for. I grabbed the hot kettle and threw water across the floor, not at him, just between us. He stepped back. The kettle clanged. Steam rose. The record skipped, repeating one fractured note again and again. Then blue lights washed the windows. Police voices. A hard knock. Elias looked at the well through the rain-streaked glass. For 1 second, he seemed less like a mastermind than a lonely man caught beside his own machinery. They found the equipment in the cellar beneath the cafe. Speakers installed inside the old well shaft. Directional microphones hidden in the ironwork. Cameras watching the square, the library, the station, the entrance to my apartment. Burner phones. Cloned accounts. Voice models trained on dozens of townspeople. Folders named by feeling. Guilt. Grief. Affair. Addiction. Amy. Mine was the largest. Inside were recordings from outside my door. Screenshots of my deleted messages. Notes on my routines. Phrases copied from my old posts. One line read, responds to gentle authority. Doubts herself when corrected calmly. Useful. That word stayed with me. Useful. Not loved. Not understood. Useful. The well never whispered again. The council sealed it 2 weeks later with a flat iron cover and a chain. People still cross the square faster at night. Folklore does not die when exposed. It changes shape. I moved away before spring. Now I live in a city where neon reflects in rain, and no one knows my coffee order unless I tell them. I keep my curtains closed. I use new passwords. I do not send voice notes. Sometimes, when my refrigerator hums at night, I still hear my own voice rising from the dark. Not predicting the future. Repeating what someone learned by watching me break. That is what frightens me most now. Not wells. Not darkness. Not voices. But the fact that a person can study your wounds closely enough to impersonate fate. Trust used to feel like leaning over and listening for an answer. Now I think trust is knowing when to step back from the edge. Because privacy is not silence. It is ownership of your name, your grief, your memory, your reflection in the water. And once someone steals that reflection, they do not need magic to haunt you. They only need your voice. Story 6. The first time I heard the bell, I thought it was my phone. That was how tired I was. How trained. Even in sleep, I still expected someone to need something from me. A message. An apology. An explanation. I woke in the dark with rain tapping the window and my apartment humming around me. Refrigerator. Radiator. A loose pipe in the wall. The small sounds of a place trying to prove it was alive. Then it came again. One deep note. Slow. Metallic. Wrong. The church bell. Midnight. I sat up in bed. Across the street, the town lay under fog. Wet pavement. Closed shops. Neon from the only pharmacy bleeding red and green into puddles. At the end of the main road, the old church steeple rose like a black finger against the sky. The bell had not worked in 40 years. Everyone in Briar Glen told me that. They said it with pride, like broken things were part of the town's heritage. Still, it rang 12 times. Each note entered my chest before it entered my ears. By the 7th toll, I felt strangely calm. By the 10th, I forgot why I was afraid. By the 12th, the room tilted softly. And then morning arrived. No dream. No memory. Just sunlight, cold coffee on my bedside table, and mud on the soles of my feet. I lived alone above a closed bakery because I was trying to become a person again. 6 months earlier, I had left my husband. Ethan never looked dangerous. He wore clean shirts, remembered people's names, and touched my shoulder in public like tenderness had witnesses. At home, he edited reality. You agreed to this. You're misremembering. You always make yourself the victim. After 4 years, I started keeping notes in my phone just to confirm my life had happened. When my aunt died and left me her small apartment in Briar Glen, I took it as rescue. A quiet town, a clean break, a place where nobody knew me. That lasted 11 days. The morning after the bell, I found a text from an unknown number. You walked in the rain again, Mara. Barefoot. I stared at it while the kitchen light flickered above me. My name in that message felt too intimate. Not threatening. Worse. Familiar. I deleted it, then undeleted it, then took a screenshot. Old habits. Proof. At noon, I went to Bellwether Cafe, the only place open during heavy rain. Soft jazz played from a speaker behind the counter. The windows were fogged. Cups clicked. Someone laughed too loudly, then stopped when I entered. That was Briar Glen, a town that noticed everything and admitted nothing. The man behind the counter looked up from wiping glasses. You look like you didn't sleep, he said. His voice was gentle, not flirtatious, accurate. I'm fine. People usually say that when they aren't. His name was Adrian Vale. He owned the cafe, ran the local history page, and seemed to know which chair I would choose before I chose it. Back corner. Wall behind me. Exit visible. He brought coffee without asking. No sugar, he said. I looked up. He smiled faintly. You ordered it that way last week. Maybe I had. Maybe he remembered customers. I wanted to believe it. He sat across from me during his break, careful not to come too close. You heard it, he said. The bell. His eyes shifted to the rainy window. Most newcomers do. That bell is broken. Most broken things still have a purpose. I almost laughed. Is that supposed to comfort me? No, he said. It's supposed to warn you. That should have frightened me. Instead, I felt less alone. That was how danger enters sometimes. Not through the locked door. Through the person who says they hear the sound too. Over the next week, the bell rang every night at midnight. And every morning I lost time. At first it was small. A mug placed in the bathroom sink. My coat hanging wet beside the door. A voicemail I did not remember recording. Then the hours became larger. I woke one morning with an email draft open on my laptop. Subject line, I consent. No recipient. No body. Just those 2 words. My phone buzzed before I could move. Unknown number. You always stop before telling the truth. I blocked it. Another message came from a different number. That's why we help. At the cafe, Adrian listened quietly while rain slid down the glass. You should leave town for a few days, he said. I just got here. That doesn't mean you're safe. The way he said safe made something inside me soften. I hated that. He walked me home that evening under one umbrella. The street was slick with neon reflections. Fog curled around our ankles. From a nearby apartment, distant music leaked through a half-open window. At my door, he paused. You hum when you're anxious, he said. I went still. What? An old song. Jazz standard. The one with the trumpet. I had never hummed around him. Not once. He looked almost embarrassed. Sorry. Thin walls in this town. I lived above an empty bakery. No shared wall with the cafe. No apartment next door. Still I nodded. Maybe he had heard me somewhere else. Maybe I was overthinking. I told myself it made sense. The next missing hour happened while I was awake. I was washing a cup at 11:57 p.m. when my phone lit up. No caller ID. Then the bell rang. 1. The cup slipped from my hand. 2. The kitchen stretched away from me. 3. Rain became static. 4. My reflection in the window blinked too late. Then I was standing outside the church, barefoot, hands freezing. A circle of people stood under black umbrellas near the side entrance. No chanting, no candles, nothing dramatic, just townspeople, the pharmacist, the school principal, a police sergeant, Adrian. He looked directly at me, not surprised, not sorry. The bell gave its final toll. My memory cut out. Morning, bed, mud on my feet, my phone on the pillow beside me. A voice note waited from Adrian. His voice was soft. I told you broken things have purpose. I played it again. Behind his voice, I heard breathing. Mine. Slow. Obedient. That day, I searched the town archives. The public library smelled of wet paper and radiator dust. Old fluorescent lights hummed overhead. I found articles about the church bell being removed from service after a fire in 1983. Photos showed the bell cracked, blackened, useless. Then I found another file, not in the archives, in my email, sent from my own account at 3:12 a.m. Attached photographs, me entering the church, me standing in the basement, me seated at a long table with 12 other people, my face blank, Adrian beside me, one hand resting near my wrist. Not touching, almost touching. A message followed from him. Memory is not identity, Mara. It's only a record. Records can be corrected. I locked myself in the library bathroom and called the state police. Not the local station, the state police. I had learned that from Ethan too. When the room is controlled, leave the room. Detective Lorne arrived 2 hours later in an unmarked car, rainwater dripping from his coat. He did not smile too much. That helped. I showed him everything. Texts, voice notes, screenshots, photos. He asked if I had enemies. I said, I have an ex-husband. He asked if my ex knew where I lived. I said, probably. Then his technician checked my phone, and the story changed. Spyware, remote access, a clone dating profile I had deleted months ago, microphone activation, location logs. My sleep app had been syncing with an unknown server since the day I moved in. Someone had access before you arrived, the technician said. My stomach went cold. Adrian had known my coffee order, my humming, my old trauma language, my private routines. Not because he understood me, because he had read me. That night, Detective Lorne placed a recorder in my apartment and officers outside the church. I stayed awake with every light on. The refrigerator hummed. Rain tapped the windows. My phone sat on the table like a trapped insect. At 11:59, it buzzed. Adrian, don't make them misunderstand us. I typed back with shaking hands. Who is us? The reply came instantly. The vestry. Then the bell rang. The sound was not coming from the church alone. It came from my phone, my speaker, the old intercom in the stairwell, the pharmacy sign outside, low frequencies hidden under the bell tone, vibrating through glass and bone. My vision blurred. I gripped the table. Detective Lorne had warned me, cover one ear, focus on one object, keep speaking. So I spoke. My name is Mara Ellison. I am in my apartment. It is midnight. I do not consent. The second toll hit. My knees weakened. On my phone, Adrian's voice came through. You always need a man to tell you what is real. That old wound opened. Ethan's wound. But this time, I recognized the hand holding the knife. No, I whispered. You studied the wound. That isn't the same as knowing me. Silence. Then footsteps in the hallway. Slow. Calm. A key entered my lock. I backed away, phone recording. The door opened. Adrian stepped inside, rain dark on his coat. He looked sad. That was the worst part. You were doing well, he said. Stay back. You don't have to be afraid of structure. People like you fall apart without it. Behind him, in the hallway, radios crackled. His eyes flicked once. Too late. Police moved in from both ends of the corridor. Adrian did not run. He only looked at me as they took his wrists. "You'll miss the quiet," he said. I laughed once. It sounded nothing like me. "No," I said. "I'll miss who I was before men like you called control quiet." The church basement gave up everything. Servers behind a false wall. Audio equipment wired through old town infrastructure. Burner phones. Medical files from the clinic. Therapy notes. Edited recordings. AI-generated voices. A list of residents marked by category. Grief. Debt. Affair. Addiction. Divorce. Newcomer. The bell was not magic. It was conditioning. A system. Sound cues, hacked devices, compromised medication schedules, sleep deprivation, social pressure, blackmail, and carefully staged memory gaps. The ritual was theater for the obedient and terror for the doubtful. The vestry had controlled Briar Glen for years. Not with demons, with information. They made people doubt their own minds, then offered order as relief. Adrian was not a savior. He was the architect. He had created fake dating profiles to study vulnerable newcomers before they arrived. He had used my old messages, my search history, my recorded sleep, my divorce filings. He built a version of me that would respond to him. Then he waited for me to confuse recognition with care. The arrests took weeks. Some townspeople claimed they were victims too. Some probably were. Others looked at the ground when I passed, as if shame were a weather pattern. I moved away before the trial. Now I live in a city apartment where the windows face a brick wall and the nights are never fully quiet. Sirens, rain, footsteps upstairs, music through pipes, the old hum of machines pretending to sleep. Sometimes at midnight, I still wake before any sound. My body remembers before my mind does. I check the lock. I check my phone. I write down the date, the time, the room, my name. Proof. Not because I am broken, because I know how easily reality can be edited when someone else controls the recording. People think privacy is hiding something. It isn't. Privacy is the space where your mind belongs to you. Trust is not a stranger knowing your pain. Safety is not silence. And memory, fragile as it is, must be guarded like a door in a dark room. Because control does not always arrive shouting. Sometimes it rings like a bell at midnight, and waits for you to mistake obedience for peace. Story 7. The first child disappeared on a Thursday during rain. I remember that because the classroom windows were trembling with it, thin silver lines sliding down the glass, turning the playground into a blurred watercolor of empty swings and black trees. Her name was Lily Voss, 8 years old, quiet, always kept her pencils arranged by color. That morning, she was in my class during spelling. At lunch, she was gone. No scream, no broken gate, no witness. Just a small yellow raincoat missing from its hook and one wet footprint near the side exit. By 3 o'clock, police cars filled the school parking lot. Red and blue lights moved over the wet pavement. Parents stood under umbrellas, whispering into phones. Somewhere down the hall, a child was crying softly. I stood in my classroom with the fluorescent lights humming above me and felt my old life return. The panic, the doubt, the feeling that something was happening and everyone would later ask why I hadn't stopped it. I had moved to Ashwell after my divorce because small towns looked safe from a distance. Clean streets, old churches, a cafe with fogged windows and soft jazz playing after school. A rented apartment above a closed florist where the refrigerator hummed all night and the pipes clicked like someone walking inside the walls. I was supposed to be healing. That was the word people used. Healing. As if pain were a room you could leave if you packed neatly enough. My ex-husband, Paul, had taught me to mistrust my own fear. He never hit me. He only corrected me until I became uncertain about everything. You're imagining tone. You're making connections that aren't there. You always need a villain. So when Lily vanished and I felt, deep in my bones, that something was wrong before anyone said it aloud, I told myself to be careful. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe trauma had made me dramatic. I wanted to believe it. Lily came back 3 days later. That was when the town became quiet in a new way. Her mother found her standing outside their house at dawn, dry in the middle of heavy rain. Same yellow coat, same braids, same tiny purple backpack. No injuries, no memory. The police called it shock. The town called it a miracle. I saw her Monday morning. She walked into my classroom with her mother gripping her shoulder too tightly. The other children stared. Lily sat at her desk and arranged her pencils by color. Red, blue, green, yellow, perfectly. Then she looked at me. Her eyes were wrong. Not empty exactly. Hollow, like someone had removed the child from behind them and left the lights on. "Good morning, Miss Vale," she said. Her voice was soft, flat, too calm. I knelt beside her desk. "Lily, I'm glad you're back." She tilted her head. "Are you?" I smiled because the room was full of children. "Of course." She looked past me toward the window. Adults are easiest when they're relieved. My smile froze. "What did you say?" She picked up her pencil. I said I missed reading time. I heard what I heard. I know I did. But the classroom clock ticked. Rain tapped the windows. The heater sighed. And I told myself it made sense. Children say strange things after fear. Adults do too. That afternoon, I met Daniel Hart. He was the new school counselor, assigned after Lily's return. Mid-30s, calm face, careful hands, the kind of voice that made panic feel slightly embarrassed. He found me in the empty teacher's lounge, staring at untouched coffee while the vending machine hummed. "You're holding your breath," he said. I looked up. Am I? Most people do when they're trying not to feel responsible. That should have bothered me. Instead, it landed gently. He sat across from me without asking too many questions. Outside, buses groaned away through rain. Down the hall, children's voices rose and faded. "You did everything you could," he said. "You don't know that. I know teachers. The good ones blame themselves first." I wanted to distrust him. I didn't. There are people who enter a room like a blanket. Warm, quiet, needed. Daniel became familiar quickly. Too quickly, I would later think. He left tea on my desk. Recommended breathing exercises. Sent articles about trauma recovery and child dissociation. He remembered that I hated cinnamon. He knew I stayed late on Thursdays. He knew I hummed old jazz standards when grading papers. "Thin walls," he said when I asked. But my classroom shared no wall with his office. Still, I smiled. Maybe I had hummed in the hallway. Maybe he noticed everyone. I told myself it made sense. Then the second child disappeared. Owen Pierce, 9 years old. He vanished from the back seat of his father's car while his father paid for petrol. Security footage showed the car door opening, Owen stepping out calmly, and walking into fog as if someone had called his name. No one was visible. The footage had no sound. For days later, he returned. He came into class with clean shoes despite the mud outside. He sat beside Lily. They did not speak. They did not need to. At recess, I watched them stand near the fence while other children ran around them. Two still figures in yellow-gray light. Their shadows stretched long on the wet asphalt. For 1 second, their heads turned at the same time toward the staff room window. Toward me. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. You watch them like they belong to you. I stepped back from the glass. Another message appeared. They never did. I showed Daniel. His face changed, but only slightly. "Could be a parent," he said. "A parent who knows I was watching? Small towns notice everything." He said it softly, reasonably. That was the problem with reasonable explanations. They were easy to hide inside. That night, in my apartment, rain tapped the windows. Neon from the pharmacy across the street reflected in the black glass. My laptop hummed on the table. An email arrived from an address made of random letters. Subject line, classroom observation. Inside was a video. My classroom, filmed from above. I watched myself kneel beside Lily's desk on the day she returned. Watched my face tighten when she spoke. The audio was clear. Adults are easiest when they're relieved. My blood went cold. The video ended. Then another file appeared. A voice note. My own voice from my apartment late at night. I was humming, then whispering in my sleep. No, Paul. I know what I saw. I closed the laptop so hard the screen flashed white. The apartment went silent around me. Refrigerator, pipes, distant siren, my breathing. Not alone. That was the first night I understood the town was watching me back. Over the next week, 3 more children vanished and returned. Always calm, always clean, always changed. They stopped laughing, stopped fighting, stopped asking random questions. They completed worksheets perfectly and stared at adults with patient, empty faces. Parents called them traumatized. Doctors called them stabilized. Daniel called it post-event regulation. I called it absence. One morning, during art, I asked the class to draw something that made them feel safe. Most drew houses, pets, mothers, superheroes. The returned children drew the same thing. A black circle with smaller circles around it. A nest. Lily saw me looking. "You're not supposed to notice patterns yet," she said. My hand tightened around the paper. "Who told you that?" She blinked once. "Everyone." At lunch, I searched the school network logs using the old admin password left taped under the keyboard. I expected nothing. I found camera access. Remote. Repeated. From inside the counseling office. Daniel's office. My phone buzzed before I could move. "Daniel, come downstairs. We should talk before you scare yourself. Asterisk, asterisk." I did not go downstairs. I went to the police. Not the local station first. The county office 2 towns over. I had learned something from surviving Paul. When the room feels staged, find another room. Detective Mara Singh listened without interrupting. I gave her the messages, the email, the network screenshots, the video, the voice note. She asked one question. Who benefits from the fear? I thought of parents crying on the news, of children returning blank and obedient, of Daniel's calm hands around warm tea. "I don't know," I said, "but I did. Part of me did." The investigation moved quietly. For 3 days, I kept teaching while police traced IP addresses and subpoenaed records. Daniel acted normal, softer even. He walked me to my car beneath streetlights reflected in puddles. "You look exhausted," he said. "I'm not sleeping. You don't have to carry this alone." The rain whispered against his umbrella. For a second, I wanted to tell him everything. That was what frightened me most. Not his lies, my need for them. "You know," he said, "fear can become addictive after abuse. Sometimes the mind invents patterns because peace feels unfamiliar." There it was. Paul's language in a new mouth. My body recognized it before my mind did. I stepped away. "Did I tell you about Paul?" Daniel looked at me. Too still. "You mentioned him." "No," I said. "I didn't." For the first time, his smile failed. Only for a second. But I saw the person underneath. Cold. Patient. Measuring the room again. That night, the 6th child disappeared. A boy from my class. Noah. The smallest one. He had left a drawing on my desk before dismissal. The black circle. The nest. And written below it in careful pencil. "It eats what they feel." I found the paper after he was gone. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Now you understand the lesson. Detective Singh told me to stay home." I didn't. I drove through fog and rain to the abandoned youth center behind the church, the place all 6 children had drawn without naming it. Police were already nearby, but not close enough. I saw Daniel's car first. Then lights beneath the boarded windows. Inside, the air smelled of dust, wet coats, and humming electronics. I heard children's voices. Not crying. Repeating. "My name is Lily Voss. My name is Owen Pierce. I feel calm. I feel safe. I do not remember." I moved toward the sound and found a room filled with monitors. School cameras. Home cameras. Doorbell feeds. Bedrooms. Classrooms. Kitchen tables. Parents crying into phones. Teachers whispering in halls. Fear collected in rectangles of light. The returned children sat in chairs wearing small headphones, repeating phrases from a screen. Their faces were pale and still, but alive. Not replicas, not hollowed by nature, hollowed by method. Behind them stood Daniel. He did not look surprised, only disappointed. "You should have waited for the police," he said. "What did you do to them?" He sighed quietly. "Protected them from chaos. You kidnapped children. We removed them from unstable emotional environments and returned them regulated." His voice stayed calm, professional, almost kind. "Adults are animals when frightened, Elena. We studied that. Fear makes them obedient, generous, easy to guide. The word opened the room wider. On the wall behind him was the black circle symbol. The Nest, a private behavioral research group, a secret society with modern tools and old hunger. Local officials, medical staff, parents in debt, people who believed control was the same as order. "You used children to control the town," I said. Daniel's eyes softened. "No, we used adult fear to reveal the town. The children were mirrors. Police lights flashed through the cracked boards. Red, blue, rain." Daniel glanced toward the windows. For one moment, his calm thinned into irritation. Then Lily stood up, small, silent. She removed her headphones. "No," she said. Only one word. But it broke something. Owen stood too. Then Noah. The children did not run. They simply stopped repeating what they had been taught. Detective Singh entered with officers behind her. "Daniel Hart," she said, "step away from the children." Daniel lifted his hands slowly. He looked at me one last time. "You'll see," he said. "People beg for cages when freedom frightens them." I said nothing. Some sentences deserve no reply. The arrests lasted weeks. Daniel was not Daniel Hart. His real name was Adrian Klein, a former researcher tied to a dissolved behavioral technology company. He had used fake credentials, fake profiles, burner phones, cloned voices, school cameras, hacked family devices, and stolen therapy records. The unseen entity was not a monster. It was a network. People feeding on fear, because fear made others controllable. The children had not been replaced. They had been rehearsed, sleep-deprived, coached, recorded, returned with scripts planted deep enough to look like silence. No graphic horror, no supernatural force, just human beings with access. That was worse. I still teach. Not in Ashwell. Somewhere larger. Somewhere with traffic noise and locked school servers and windows that face a busy street. At night, my apartment hums with ordinary machines. Rain still taps the glass. Neon still trembles in puddles. Distant music still rises through walls. Sometimes a child looks too calm, and my chest tightens. Sometimes my phone buzzes after midnight, and I wait before touching it. Lily writes to me once a year. Her letters are short. She tells me about books, school plays, a dog named Pepper. She always signs her name in bright purple ink. Proof of color returning. I have learned that evil rarely announces itself as evil. It arrives organized, gentle, credentialed. It speaks softly about safety while removing choice. It studies your wounds, so it can press the exact place where trust begins. And children are not hollow. Adults make them that way when fear becomes more important than love. Privacy is not secrecy. Boundaries are not paranoia. Safety is not obedience. And trust should never require you to become smaller, quieter, easier to control. Because the most dangerous monsters do not feed on bodies. They feed on permission. They wait for fear to open the door. Then they call the cage protection. Story 8. The first time I heard the train, I thought grief had finally learned how to make machinery. It was after midnight. Rain covered the town in a silver skin. Street lights trembled in puddles. The windows of closed shops reflected neon signs from places that should have been asleep. A laundromat, a pharmacy, a cafe with one blue light left burning above the counter. I had moved to Bracken Hill 6 weeks earlier, after the divorce. People called it a fresh start. I called it exile. My apartment sat above an insurance office on a street that smelled of wet brick and old coffee. At night, the refrigerator hummed like a small engine. Pipes clicked inside the walls. My phone buzzed with messages I didn't answer. My sister sent, "You alive?" My therapist sent appointment reminders. My ex-wife sent nothing. That was worse. I worked remotely, slept badly, ate standing over the sink. Some nights, I walked until the city thinned into warehouses and cold fields. That was how I found the abandoned station. Briar Lane Terminal. A place the town pretended not to remember. Its platform sagged under moss and rainwater. Broken lamps leaned over the tracks. The ticket booth windows were cloudy with dust. Rusted letters clung to the roofline like old teeth. Everyone in Bracken Hill had a story about it. On foggy nights, they said, a train still came. No conductor, no schedule, no lights except the pale glow inside the cars. People boarded and vanished. Sometimes they returned days later, mute and staring, walking home through the rain without shoes, unable or unwilling to say where they had been. I didn't believe ghost stories, but lonely people follow strange sounds. The train arrived at 12:13. No whistle, no engine roar, just a low vibration through the platform boards. Then headlights bloomed inside the fog. The train slid in, black and wet, windows glowing softly. Its doors opened with a tired sigh. No conductor stepped out. No passengers moved inside. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Don't get on yet, Daniel." I froze. Nobody here knew my name. I looked around the empty platform. Rain ticked against the roof. Fog moved between the tracks like breath. Another message came. "You always rush when you're afraid of being left behind." My throat tightened. That was what my ex-wife used to say. I backed away from the platform. The doors closed. The train pulled into the dark. The next morning, I met Iris. She was sitting in the corner of the cafe downtown, near a fogged window, reading a book about railway architecture. She had short black hair, a green coat, and the kind of face that made silence feel acceptable. I only noticed her because she noticed me first. "You went to Briar Lane," she said. I stopped with my coffee halfway to the table. "How would you know?" "Your shoes." She nodded down. "Red clay. Only place near town with that soil." It was reasonable. That was the first problem. Everything she said sounded reasonable. She told me she was documenting abandoned infrastructure. Old stations, closed factories, forgotten service tunnels. She spoke gently, like someone handling fragile things. When I mentioned the train, her expression changed. Not disbelief. Recognition. "Don't go alone," she said. "Why?" "Because the people who come back from that place don't come back the same." I laughed once. "You believe that?" "I believe fear can be engineered," she said. "And towns are very good at protecting old secrets." That sentence stayed with me. We started meeting for coffee. Not dates. Not exactly. I wasn't ready for dates. That was what I told myself. I had deleted the apps, then downloaded them again, then deleted them after realizing loneliness made every profile look like a rescue boat. Iris never pushed. She asked careful questions. She remembered my coffee order. She noticed when I didn't sleep. She sent articles about liminal spaces, urban legends, railway accidents, trauma responses. Comfort arrived disguised as research. One night, she sent me a voice note. Rain in the background. Soft jazz somewhere behind her. "I know you're awake," she said. "The hard hour is usually 3, isn't it?" I stared at the phone. It was 3:04 a.m. I wanted to believe it was empathy. Maybe I had mentioned my insomnia. Maybe I was overthinking. I told myself it made sense. The messages from the unknown number continued. "You still sleep with one light on. You hum when you're reading emails. You miss being chosen." Then one that made my hands go cold. "Bean, don't go back. Bean." My mother called me that when I was small. Before she left. Before my father turned her absence into a rule nobody could mention. I had never told Iris. I had never told anyone. When I asked the unknown number who they were, a voice note arrived. My mother's voice. Not perfect. Too smooth at the edges. But close enough to hurt. "Danny," she said. "The station keeps what people abandon." I threw the phone onto the couch and stood in the apartment silence, listening to the refrigerator hum and the rain tap the windows. AI voice cloning. That was my first thought, because the alternative was impossible. Someone had found old videos, old accounts, family archives, my life scraped and reassembled. Iris told me to document everything. Screenshots, she said. Metadata. Don't delete. Don't engage. She sounded calm, capable, safe. I wanted safety badly enough to confuse it with truth. The second time I went to Briar Lane, Iris came with me. Fog pressed low over the tracks. Rain beaded on her coat. Distant sirens dissolved into the fields. The broken station clock still read 12:13. "You're shaking," she said. "I'm cold." "No," she said softly. "You're remembering something." I looked at her. She looked back without blinking. "Everybody brings a ghost here," she said. "That doesn't mean the ghost is real." The train arrived. Its windows glowed. The doors opened. Inside, the car was warm. Too warm. The air smelled of dust, wet fabric, and old perfume. No advertisements. No route maps. Just rows of seats and passengers sitting perfectly still. A woman in a red scarf stared at her hands. A teenage boy in a school blazer looked straight ahead. An old man sat with a suitcase on his knees. Nobody spoke. Nobody blinked. Their faces were pale in the yellow light. Iris whispered, "Don't touch anyone." I moved down the aisle, my heartbeat loud in my ears. The train rocked though it had not moved. Rain streaked the windows, but outside was no longer the platform. Outside was a different town. Older cars, different signs. A cinema marquee advertising a film from 1979. Then the reflection in the window shifted. I saw my apartment, my hallway, my door opening, a figure stepping inside. I turned sharply. The passengers remained still. The old man's eyes moved toward me. Only his eyes. My phone buzzed. No signal, yet a message appeared. "You are easier to guide when frightened." I looked at Iris. She was watching my phone, not the passengers. "Iris." Her face softened. "What? How did the message come through?" A pause. Then she said, "Some systems don't need towers." It was a strange answer. Too prepared. The train lights flickered. For 1 second, the passengers were not passengers. They were screens. Projected faces. Bodies made of mannequins, coats, wigs, shadow, and suggestion. Then the lights steadied, and the illusion returned. I stepped backward. "I need to get off." Iris reached for my wrist. "Not hard. Not yet." "Daniel," she said, "you're close to understanding." I pulled away. The doors were already closing. I shoved my shoulder between them and forced myself out onto the platform as the train began to move. I fell onto wet boards. Pain flashed through my side, dull and breathless, but I got up. Iris did not follow. She stood behind the glass, face calm, hand raised. Like goodbye, like instruction. The train vanished into fog. I went to the police that night, not with a ghost story, with files, screenshots, voice notes, location data, photos of the train interior, a video, blurred but useful, showing projectors mounted above the carriage windows. The officer at the desk looked skeptical until I played my mother's voice note and showed him the metadata. Then he stopped smiling. Detective Rowe took over. She had gray eyes and no patience for folklore. Within 48 hours, the abandoned station became a crime scene. They found cables hidden under the platform boards, portable transmitters, a diesel maintenance engine modified to push 2 restored passenger cars along a closed spur line, projection screens fitted behind old windows, speakers built into the walls, cameras hidden in luggage racks. The mute returnees were not cursed. They were drugged, disoriented, and psychologically conditioned into silence. No gore, no ritual, just fear, isolation, and technology. Detective Rowe said it had been happening for years. Targets were selected carefully. Recently divorced people, grieving people, runaways, insomniacs, people whose lives already looked unstable from the outside, people no one would immediately believe. Iris was not Iris. Her real name was Mara Voss, former behavioral researcher, former true crime podcast producer, former employee of a private surveillance company. She had built an entire mythology around Briar Lane Terminal. Fake profiles, burner phones, scraped social media, data broker records, hacked emails, voice cloning. She studied victims until she knew the exact shape of their loneliness. Then she offered a story that made the loneliness meaningful. A ghost train, a liminal woje, a place where the abandoned gathered, a place where silence became proof. What did she want? I asked Detective Rowe. Rowe looked at the evidence board. Photos, maps, names connected by red string. Control, she said, and an audience. They arrested Mara near the river bridge at dawn. I was there because the police had asked me to identify her from a distance. Fog clung to the water. The sky was a flat gray sheet. Rain tapped the hood of the police car. Somewhere far away, a train horn sounded from the real line, ordinary and tired. Mara stood by the bridge in her green coat. Hands visible. No panic. When Rowe approached, Mara looked past her at me. "You saw what you needed to see," she called. I said nothing. She smiled with terrible gentleness. "You wanted the train to be real. Real pain deserves architecture." The phrase struck me harder than it should have. Real pain deserves architecture. That was how she worked. She gave suffering a house, then locked people inside it. As officers cuffed her, my phone buzzed. One final message. "Bean, come back." My mother's voice note attached. I didn't play it. For once, I let the dead stay silent. Months passed. Briar Lane Terminal was sealed. The tracks were removed. The cafe took down its old railway photographs after people complained. The town stopped telling the story as if it were charming. I moved again. A brighter apartment. Better locks. No smart devices except the ones I actually understood. At night, the refrigerator still hums. Rain still taps the windows. Neon still turns the glass into a dark mirror. Sometimes I see a train in the reflection. Not outside. Inside me. A row of silent passengers made from grief, shame, longing, and all the versions of myself that boarded when someone promised meaning. I survived because I stopped mistaking mystery for truth. But survival did not make me innocent. I wanted to believe. That is the part one carry. Trust is not the person who knows you're wound fastest. Privacy is not an overreaction. Boundaries are not locks against love. They are proof that love does not need to break in. Obsession studies. Control listens. Manipulation remembers. And sometimes the most dangerous place in the world is not an abandoned station on a foggy night. It is the quiet part of you that still hopes someone has come all that way just to bring you home. Story 9. Rain streaked the windows of my apartment, neon reflections fractured across the hardwood floor. I sat in the dim light, staring at my hands. Since the breakup, silence had become a weight pressing against my chest. Cafes smelled of stale coffee, distant jazz drifting faintly through cracked doors. Footsteps echoed in hallways like ghostly reminders that the city moved on while I remained. The town had been whispering about the abandoned community hall for weeks. Portraits, strange paintings appearing overnight. Faces of residents, frozen in impossible moments, some mundane, some violent. I told myself it was rumor, small-town hysteria. But curiosity was a fragile, persuasive thing. I walked through the rain to the hall, the chill pressing against my coat. Puddles reflected neon signs and streetlights, fragmented like shards of memory. The door groaned as I pushed it open. Inside, the smell of dust and turpentine hung thick. The floorboards creaked under my weight. Shadows stretched across the walls. And then I saw them. The paintings. My neighbors, my co-workers, even myself. Faces captured in moments I didn't remember living. One painting, a neighbor falling from a ladder. Another, the local barista holding a knife. My chest tightened. The scenes were eerily precise. I rationalized. It's coincidence. Maybe someone is an obsessed artist. I told myself it made sense. Weeks passed, and the paintings began to mirror reality. The neighbor fell exactly as painted. The barista had an incident, minor but violent. Panic settled like a stone in my gut. Each new canvas was a prediction, a blueprint of the inevitable. Mara appeared one evening, calm, attentive, comforting. She knew my routines, the cafe I lingered in, the streets I avoided, the song I hummed in solitude. She seemed to anticipate my fears, gently guiding me through the hallways. I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe I was overthinking. I wanted to believe it, yet impossible details emerged. She knew my old nickname, the exact time I left my apartment, even private thoughts I hadn't spoken aloud. The painting seemed to respond to her presence, faces turning slightly, eyes following her movements. I began documenting everything. Photos, notes, timestamps. My phone buzzed with emails I hadn't sent, drafts filled with words I didn't recall typing. Metadata placed me in rooms I had never entered. Surveillance was subtle, invasive, total. Every step catalogued, every hesitation noted. I snuck into the hall one night, past the lock, past the faint hum of electricity and distant sirens. Floorboards creaked. Shadows shifted. The paintings pulsed with detail, capturing not just faces but gestures, expressions I hadn't made yet. It was a liminal world, a place where time bent and memory faltered. The spiral tightened. Every new discovery was more invasive. A painting of me leaving the apartment exactly as I did, a blurred image of Mara standing beside me in the reflection. I realized she was not what she seemed. Calm, attentive, yes, but manipulative, observing my reactions, cataloging my fears. I tried to rationalize. She's helping. She's protecting. I told myself it made sense. The climax came when I traced the network, burner phones, fake profiles, digital surveillance, metadata trails. Mara had been orchestrating the obsession, constructing identities, observing multiple victims. The hall, the paintings, they were part of a long-term manipulation campaign, feeding on fear and isolation. Police arrived, evidence in hand, cameras installed, accounts traced. Mara vanished before confrontation. Only fragments remained: emails, AI-generated voice notes, digital shadows of control. The paintings themselves were harmless without her orchestration. I survived. But the town, the hall, the neon reflections in rain-soaked streets, they haunt me still. Shadows stretch too long, reflections lag behind movement, distant music echoes with sinister weight. Trust is fragile. Privacy is an illusion. Memory can be weaponized. Boundaries blur. The world is not as safe as it seems, and those who watch may already know more than you do. I walk the streets carefully now. Every puddle reflects not just my face, but the possibility of observation. Every hum of an appliance, every floorboard creak, every phone buzz is a reminder. Someone somewhere cataloged my fears, my routines, my life. I survived, but I am not the same. And sometimes, standing in the rain, neon bleeding across the streets, I whisper to myself, who watches while you believe yourself alone? Who constructs reality around your fears, anticipating your every move? And what remains when observation itself becomes the predator? I don't know, and I fear I may never know.